Hello there and welcome to Unqualified Opinions. I'm Marko Jerkovic.
And I'm Beiermann.
And on today's episode, we'll be discussing the AFC Playoff picture. We'll be talking our 4 division winners and 3 wildcard teams. Remember that there are 7 playoff teams. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your own unqualified opinions in the comment section down below. So, Will, I don't think it's much of a surprise. I assume we both have Kansas City at number 1.
Absolutely. It's one of those things where you can't take them out of that top spot until they've given you a reason to. And I don't see them giving a reason to.
So I think the primary reason that I have Kansas City at number 1 is obviously Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league. Andy Reid is the top 5 head coach in the league. And there's a consistency and a comfortability with that system that has now been in place for several years. And they still have a lot of great offensive weapons. Of course, Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill and many others. And they signed Joe Thuney from the Patriots. He's a versatile offensive lineman. So kind of any hole they have, as it was shown in the Super Bowl, obviously a consistent offensive line is absolutely necessary to being an elite football team.
Yeah, I was going to say the only real narrative against the Chiefs in the offseason so far has just been that offensive line. There are still some question marks there. They're going to be probably starting 2 rookies from last I saw, Creed Humphrey from Oklahoma. Not as much experience on the line, but I mean, they're pretty set everywhere else. I wouldn't be too concerned about them.
All right, so second I have the Buffalo Bills. Do you have the Buffalo Bills there?
I also have the Buffalo Bills. They are probably the team I'm the most excited to watch this year, honestly.
Yeah, so I think Josh Allen has continued to make steps all throughout his career, his very short career with the Buffalo Bills. I wouldn't say that I'd consider him an MVP candidate this year, but I think he's probably a fringe guy. He could potentially, especially if the Bills win 12, 13, 14 games, I think he's a guy who could maybe sneak into the top 5. I certainly wouldn't put him in the same category as Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Russell Wilson.
He's real close for me,
He's
honestly.
certainly firmly entrenched in that second tier of guys. Certainly a Pro Bowler and a guy who seems to be getting better year after year and week after week. And certainly Buffalo has a team that, is going to surround him with a lot of talent. And I know the running game has been an issue for Buffalo in the past. I'm not totally sure if that's going to be a problem, but their defense is really, really solid. I think overall Buffalo also in a division that they firmly control, and that their schedule actually isn't that difficult. So we both have Buffalo at 2. Let's see if we finally have some differentiation here. At number 3, I have the Cleveland Browns. Yes or no?
I have the Ravens at 3.
Okay. So really quick, why I have the Browns there is I think they have the second best weaponry in the league other than the Chiefs. Obviously, they have Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, Austin Hooper, David Njoku. Part of the problem there is I've named more skill players than you can put on a field at once. So they do have to not only spread the ball around, but manage several egos. And of course, Baker Mayfield, his consistency will be paramount to this team's success. Defensively, I don't think I have an issue, although I was surprised to see that they were 12th in points allowed last year. They felt like a much better defense to me, but of course, their offense did also score a lot quicker and a lot more points than other teams, thereby giving, other opponents obviously more offensive opportunities than, say, a slower-paced team would. But I firmly believe that the Browns are a quite solid team. I wouldn't go as far as to say they're a Super Bowl contender, but in my eyes, the 3rd best team in the AFC.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the Ravens, it's too early to take them out of that spot until Cleveland's proved they earned it, because it's really going to be Cleveland versus Baltimore.
Absolutely.
That honestly might be the best inter-divisional rivalry this year. Not traditional rivalry-wise, but I mean, Bills and Chiefs are decently far ahead of everyone else in their division. So it's going to be Ravens-Browns really fighting at it for that for that top playoff spot. And the Ravens have made some good moves. They drafted Rashad Bateman and Tylan Wallace, who are big helps at receiver, which is consistently their biggest position of need. And then they kept everyone on their 7th-ranked defense, added Odafe Owe from Penn State. I think they didn't lose anyone big, and they shored up a good team.
I certainly think that this is probably the most competitive division, not entirely the division, but as far as winning the division, this race between the Ravens and the Browns, I think is the closest, the most competitive, the most intriguing. Just like you said, it's kind of a toss-up. I just happen to pick the Browns. I just do think that offensively, they're going to be a bit more consistent and two-dimensional compared to the attack that the Ravens might have. Moving on now to whoever you had winning the AFC South, the number 4 seed, I had the Tennessee Titans. Obviously, I think this starts and ends with Derrick Henry. Ryan Tannehill is a serviceable NFL quarterback. He's competent at the very least, and they do have several really solid receiving options, but it still starts and ends with Derrick Henry, who was the first 2,000-yard rusher in the NFL in more than a decade, and they obviously run an offense counter to what is more pragmatic in the current day NFL, and it was a detriment to them sometimes last season, but this team runs through Derrick Henry, and he's still healthy and functioning, so I can't put them any lower than the 4th seed.
I also have the Tennessee Titans at the 4th seed. I just think the AFC South has no real competition for them unless Carson Wentz somehow can recapture his 2015 Eagles form. I don't see a big competitor within that division coming out at all. And I'll disagree with you in that I think Ryan Tannehill is tremendously underrated as a quarterback. He's not going to set the world on fire, but he's consistently been able to make big throws, win big games. Now he has Julio Jones. Now I know Julio Jones has been injured a lot frequently, but let's say Julio Jones can stay healthy. Having him and A.J. Brown, that's a dynamic top-tier group of wide receivers. That's 2 Pro Bowl caliber wide receivers. I think they can improve the passing attack, which will help Derrick Henry out because, again, he's such a beast. It's really hard to plan against him. Like, if you pack the box on him, he can usually find a way through, but they're going to be a more varied offense this year, I think, which should help them out a lot.
Absolutely. And so now to the 5 seed, the first wild card spot, I chose to put the team that I almost gave the AFC North title to. I put the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, I have the Chargers in this spot.
Really surprising.
I'm going for a sleeper here. I think Justin Herbert has such a high ceiling. The Chargers have a new coach, which I think Brandon Staley is a really exciting young coach for them, especially as an offensive play caller. I think he's going to help Justin Herbert a lot. And mostly they've just made, the sort of smart, prudent moves they need to make around a young quarterback to try to help him out and get him on his way as he continues to probably be a Pro Bowl quarterback in the next 2 years. They got Corey Linsley, Matt Fielder, brought in Jared Cook, who's still out there, still kicking. I just think they've improved their offense in enough little ways, and I think they were a lot closer to being a big success last season than people think. Like, the Chargers are a team you always think of being cursed in close play situations, one-score games. I just think they've improved enough to get past that.
The only thing I would say about the Chargers before I get on to my little bit about the Ravens is Justin Herbert is still a young developing quarterback who will make mistakes and still has a lot to learn. So pairing him with a rookie head coach who's a really young rookie head coach as far as not just age but experience, he had only been a coordinator in the NFL for 1 year last year when he was a coordinator for the Chargers. So a really inexperienced NFL head coach. That's not to say that Brandon Staley's not talented and doesn't know a lot about the game of football, but there's still just a lot of ins and outs of running an entire footballing operation that you have to get used to outside of just being the head coach. Lots of roster decisions, player management, things that he's never had to deal with before. So I think that could rock the Charger boat slightly. But anyway, at my 5, I have the Baltimore Ravens. I have them slightly below the Cleveland Browns because I might be speaking prematurely, but I think the league has a better grasp on what Lamar Jackson is, what he brings to the table. I think that there's offenses or defenses, I should say, that maybe are able to tailor what they're preparing a little bit, the week before to the type of offense that Baltimore does run. And if Lamar Jackson doesn't progress as a passer, this offseason, into this season, obviously that still heavily limits Baltimore's offense. We've seen, and you've seen, anytime they play from behind, it's really problematic. They have an inability to move the ball up and down the field vertically. But saying that, Lamar Jackson still is the most athletic NFL quarterback and one of the most dynamic players in the NFL. So he can make, something out of nothing. So I have Baltimore at 5. Now moving on to number 6.
It's Cleveland for me. Again, I think since you talked about their offense a lot, I'm going to highlight the fact that their defense, which was pretty dreadful last season, has made a lot of smart picks that's improved tremendously to pull up their free agent additions. I mean, they have, especially at the cornerback position, they have a lot of really young talent. Myles Garrett's still around. I just think the Browns have taken the right steps on the defensive end of the ball to kind of equal that offensive production. If you ask me why I have the Browns lower than the Ravens, it's because, honestly, this could be just me as a Lions fan, and we're all caught up in the stigma and the curses of, losing ways. But with a team like the Browns, it's not a smart football analyst reason, but I mean, it's just hard to bet on a team that has such a culture of losing and at best mediocrity until you see some big results.
Yeah, that's relatively understandable. And I don't know if you're going to be happy with my number 6 pick, but I think I have relative reason to substantiate this choice. I do have the New England Patriots for a multitude.
I'm shocked.
For a multitude of reasons. To be quite honest, the team was not horrible last season when basically everything went against them. And that's not to say that this season should be any different, but they do have Mac Jones and Cam Newton that are two quality quarterbacks that do bring different things to the table. They have a revamped skill position. I think if you asked anyone who had the best offseason as far as additions are concerned, they would more than likely say the Patriots. They brought in Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith at the tight end position, Nelson Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne at wide receiver. Defensively, they brought back Kyle Van Noy from the Dolphins. They signed Matthew Judon from the Ravens. They got Dante Hightower back after sitting out the year because of COVID. Also James White, and then they got Christian Barmore and Perkins in the draft to shore up their defensive line. And when you actually look at the Patriots defense, they were 7th in points last year and 18th in yards allowed. So what does that say? That was a standard Bill Belichick defense. Bend but don't break. Who cares how many yards you give up as long as at the end of a big drive, you only give up 3 instead of 7. Maybe some of my biases are leaking into this analysis, but I do think there's substantial evidence to say that this team is relatively good enough to be a 6 seed. I think there's plenty of talent gained on this team. I think there's plenty of returning veteran experience. And honestly, if I'm being totally fair, I think they're probably going to have one of the best rushing attacks in the NFL at large.
Yeah, I actually really did think about having the Patriots in there in that spot. I'll be fair with you, but was not where I ended up going for. If we want to go on to number 7.
Yeah,
here,
number 7.
I ended up taking the Steelers. It was really close because I've really liked what I've seen from Mac Jones, and I think if Mac Jones is the guy, I don't think Cam Newton's a total washout at this. Okay, I really do. But
Fair enough.
I think Mac Jones just from what I've seen has offered a lot of interesting potential. He's looked really sharp. He's looked like he's ahead of schedule as a rookie quarterback. But I've also heard, and this could be some little Kool-Aid drinking, but Ben Roethlisberger has apparently looked a lot healthier, a lot stronger, and a lot more engaged for Pittsburgh so far. They added Najee Harris, and I think that's a huge pickup for them at running back from Alabama. I think he's a game changer. I think they've really lacked a consistent rushing attack.
They did. They
the last
really
couple
did.
of years, and I think they'll help a lot. And then they have the same defense that really shut the league down for the first 2/3 of the last season.
They really did have a pretty elite team. The one thing I just struggle with the Steelers is they have a first place schedule because of how they played last season. I mean, just looking at their schedule, not to say that you're not right in your analysis putting them at 7, because if we're being honest, any team could slip into the 7 spot if they just win 8 or 9, maybe 10 games, depending on how competitive it is. But just looking at, these are just their big games I'm going to list off. Buffalo Bills, Green Bay Packers, Seattle Seahawks, obviously the Browns twice, the Bears, the Chargers, obviously the Ravens twice, the Vikings, the Titans, and the Chiefs. I mean, maybe they can squeak 8, maybe 9 wins out of that. That seems pretty tough, though.
I mean, I'm betting on Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, Devin Bush. They got Joe Schobert recently from the Jaguars, and he's a severely underrated player as an inside linebacker. Fitzpatrick, Terrell Edmonds, Joe Hayden. I just think their defense is stacked enough that if Ben Roethlisberger can play just a notch above where he was last season, I think they can definitely surprise a lot of people this year.
Yeah, and we'll see if Ben Roethlisberger begins to, improve. He's been digressing for several seasons, I would say.
He's been hurt so often. It's been hard to see if he's falling off just because he hasn't been you can't tell if it's the injuries or the age.
And speaking of injuries, or is he just getting worse? My number 7 pick, reluctantly, is the Indianapolis Colts. This 7 pick, and I know maybe you could say my bias for the Patriots at 6, but I do think there is a gap between 6 and 7 here. I think there's a number of teams that could be 7. Like I said, I have the Colts, but I think the Broncos, the Dolphins, the Chargers could all sneak in there. The reason why I picked the Colts is I do think Carson Wentz does have a lot of potential. I think he's a talented quarterback when he's healthy, and I know this offseason he had that issue with his foot that they had to get resolved, and so we'll see if he's even healthy come week 1, let alone the rest of the season. But they do have a great offensive line. Quentin Nelson is probably the best guard in football.
He's hurt too right now.
Right, but he should also be back because it was the same injury.
Wentz might be back pretty soon.
Who knows? And of course, Jonathan Taylor is a great running back, so they have a decent offense, and they have several decent wide receiver weapons, T.Y. Hilton chief among them. Their defense was 23rd in points allowed, which is not great, but they were 5th in turnovers created, so obviously giving this offense that is going to be young and inexperienced more opportunities is crucial. So yeah, I've got the Colts at 7, so to just give us your rundown from 1 to 7, just to remind everybody quick.
Again, so I had Chiefs at 1, Bills at 2, I had Ravens at 3, Titans at 4, Chargers at 5, Browns at 6, Steelers at 7.
And I had Chiefs at 1, Bills at 2, Browns at 3, Titans at 4, Ravens at 5, Patriots at 6, and Colts at 7. So those are our AFC predictions for the season, our standings.
I just wanted to ask one little question to wrap up the AFC here, Marko. Which teams are you most excited to watch out of all these teams, aside from your own team? Who are you checking out on a weekly basis?
I mean, I suppose a team that I had on my bubble, I think the Broncos will be interesting. I think Teddy Bridgewater is severely underrated as a quarterback, and it depends on how healthy he can stay, how healthy this offense can stay, and if Jerry Jeudy and Hamilton as their weapons, if they can be productive. I don't hold a lot of faith, but I think it's kind of do or die for Vic Fangio. I think if the Broncos only win, say, 5 or 6 games, I think he's kind of done. And like you mentioned, I think the Chargers will be interesting to watch, albeit they'll be messy, possibly disoriented at times due to their inexperience, but I think they'll be fun. I think they'll be a lot of fun.
For me, I said Bills earlier, then I'll say Browns just because, again, they're trying to overcome so many years of losing. It's going to be a wild show every weekend, and I'm going to be here for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are our AFC playoff spots. I guess it feels weird to say that so early, but just our standings, 1 through 7, who we think will make the playoffs in the AFC. We'll be back next week doing this with the NFC, so stay tuned for that. Again, for Will Beiermann and Marko Jerkovic, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your own unqualified opinions in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.